My name is Andrew Richey, and I'm the founder of Civic Hall. It's nice to see so many familiar faces here and also see so many new faces that I haven't seen before. Just to give you a quick thumbnail, Civic Hall is a new facility that just opened 6 months ago. It's a collaborative workspace and event space for people interested in civic tech. And we define civic tech as any technology that improves the lives of the many versus the few. And one of the reasons why we built Civic Hall in New York is because we have an incredible community of technologists, many of them represented as members of the New York Tech Meetup, who are not only interested in using technology to make money or to build businesses, but using technology to make the world a better place. And there's no better place than New York to test ideas, to change public policy, to save people's lives, and to have a 21st century life than New York City. And so without further ado, I forgot one thing to mention is I happen to be also the chairman of the New York Tech Meetup, which is now 46,000 members and grows by 500 people a month. And I have the distinct privilege of working with a colleague who is our executive director, who's going to introduce our honored guest, Jessica Lawrence, the executive director of New York Tech Meetup.
Thank you, Andrew. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. As Andrew said, I'm Jessica Lawrence, the executive director of New York Tech Meetup. For those of you who may not know too much about NYTM, as Andrew said, we have 46,000 members, which makes us the largest meetup group in the world of any type of meetup group. But in addition to being a meetup group, we're also a nonprofit advocacy organization. And in that role, we're really working on trying to build a more diverse and impactful and sustainable tech ecosystem here in New York. As part of that work, we believe it's important to create space to have conversations and dialogue across public and private sectors between our government and community so that we can develop greater mutual understanding and work together to solve some of our biggest challenges. Our special guest this evening, Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, is the highest-ranking law enforcement officer for the state, responsible for representing New York and its residents in legal matters. Since being elected Attorney General in 2011, he has worked to create a level playing field for all New York residents and businesses. He has worked closely with technology leaders and advocates across the state to encourage innovation and ensure that everyday New Yorkers are protected. It is my honor to introduce to you the 65th Attorney General of the state of New York, Eric Schneiderman.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We have come in force, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here, and then following my remarks, we're going to have a panel with some of the leaders in my office who are experts in various areas that relate to our office's vision of a collaborative approach between state government and activists in the tech community. So I have known Andrew, Mika Seafree, and others associated with the Tech Meetup for a very long time. Heidi Seek, I know, Civic Hall folks also. Andrew and Mika have been true visionaries for New York's tech sector, and as I'm going to discuss, New York's tech sector is really quite unique in the country, and part of my excitement about being here tonight is that I believe in New York, and a big part of what I believe in is the emergence of a very, very extraordinary tech sector. So it's great to be here in a place where innovation meets the passion for the public good, that is Civic Hall. And I wanted to talk tonight, and I'm going to talk at some length, because I do think that this is a very significant moment, both for our city and our economy generally, but really for the United States. The city's tech community, as I said, is rising fast. There's a wave of energy and ideas. No other city comes close. And there's a time of opportunity before us, but I also want to start off by framing up some of the challenges we face. Let me mention two interconnected trends that I think inexorably lead to the conclusion that the New York State government and agencies of the state government, which means me and my team, and the New York State tech sector, unique as it is in its commitment to civic activism, are going to be working more and more closely together in the years ahead. First trend, not particularly good news. The gridlock and dysfunction in Washington has caused a de facto devolution of power from the federal government to the states. A lot of folks in tech tend to think globally, or at least nationally, get over it. The federal government is falling apart. I thought I would start off with some candid remarks. The trend of this new federalism is not going away anytime soon. It has to do with the long-term effects of the growth of a conservative movement different from any we've seen before, a movement that in fact believes it's its mission to shut down the government that it participates in. It doesn't matter who's getting elected president, this trend is going to continue. What this is producing, and I've seen this over and over again in different agencies, so it's across the government, is that state governments will have to step in and fill the gaps where they can. Where regular federal law enforcement and regulatory agencies might have acted 20 or 30 years ago, you are going to see that some are unwilling or even unable to perform the functions they performed in the past, and the funding for big federal programs to homogenize things, to make sure states all provide a certain basic level of services, are dwindling, and they will dwindle further. So I've seen this in a variety of levels. I came into office in January 2011, and this phenomenon struck me immediately. When the federal government refused to investigate the banks who caused the meltdown of the global economy in 2008, which some of you may recall, we lost $7.4 trillion in home equity in 1 year in the United States. They weren't interested in doing an investigation of the conduct that led to this meltdown, so I put together a team of lawyers to do that, and our work eventually led the president to create an unprecedented state-federal working group to investigate this reckless misconduct, and my task force has already collected more than $60 billion, and we're still working away. But that wouldn't have happened if I and a small number of state AGs had not put together a working team to start the process. Another example, not so long ago, we figured out that the Food and Drug Administration was incapable of stopping billions of dollars of consumer fraud in the herbal supplement business. So our office stepped in, this time completely alone, to fill the gap. We launched an investigation into the fact that these products are simply not tested to ensure that what it says is on the label is ginseng or St. John's wort or echinacea, and we're transforming the way they do business. We've settled with one major company, and I'm confident that there is going to be a system of tasting in place before we're done with this. Again, you would think the FDA was watching, they're not. Finally, an issue that is very important to me, when Washington's efforts to close the gun show loophole collapsed in a public shouting match with NRA leaders storming out of a meeting, I was able to go back to the New York NRA, and we have in fact closed the gun show loophole in New York State. We have the best laws to prevent criminals and people with mental health problems from getting guns. Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly came to one of our gun shows to give us a shout out. We have the best procedures in the country, because we're not getting any help on the issue of guns from Washington. So if we can't look to Washington, what are we going to be looking at? State and local governments can fill a lot of the gaps, and I know there's a tremendous energy behind civic innovation at the municipal level, but I would urge you to take into account the fact that the central unit of government of this nation, unlike many, is the state. It's the United States of America. The states created the federal government, and the states create the local governments. And if the state wants to override the local governments, as you may have noticed politically, sometimes that happens here in our state, the state can do that. That's trend one. Trend two is the emergence of new business models, the emergence of something that is shaking up the way the private sector and now moving further towards the public sector is doing business. New business models that do not fit clearly into our existing legal framework are coming out of the tech community in an explosive way. And in the absence of the federal government's ability to handle these things, it will be up to us in state government, working with our colleagues in the private sector, to evaluate and reevaluate our laws and regulations, to draw important distinctions between what is really critical to protecting people and our economy, and what is simply a leftover vestige of the ways of doing business in an earlier era. We may occasionally have to prevent bad things from happening in Washington, but I really wouldn't spend a lot of time looking for big solutions there. We got to dig in at the state level, and we need the help of the tech sector to do it. And as I will explain, I think we're in a unique position in New York to lead this effort. So taken together, these trends mean that states are going to become vastly different one from another, much more so than has been true in the past. You can see this happening already. Some states are developing big, successful healthcare exchanges, expansive Medicaid programs. Some are not. Some states are welcoming undocumented immigrants, giving them municipal IDs or driver's licenses. Some states are not. And in my view, a major factor in determining which states are going to be successful in this new, more competitive federalist system is how nimble a state is in adjusting its laws and regulations to protect important public interests and values while also protecting new technologies and creating an environment in which we can embrace new business models. It requires us to cut through all of the boilerplate in our laws and look at what is really important, make sure we're protecting that, and allow new business models to develop as long as they're not interfering with those core values. My personal goal is to see New York at the forefront of the most successful states in dealing with these challenges, and it's obviously only possible because I have a very strong belief in the uniqueness of New York's tech sector and the fact that combined with ambitious state actors that we have in New York, and I count my team in my office as very much at the head of the pack on this, but New York's tech sector is also at the head of the pack compared to tech sectors in other states. So what's unusual about New York? New York is the home of risk-taking entrepreneurs. Unlike other colonies, New York was founded by risk-taking entrepreneurs. It took them something like 16 or 17 years to build a church. This was about making money and trying different things in business that had never been tried before. It started with a real estate deal. Some people still think it's basically about a real estate deal. But over the centuries, that entrepreneurial spirit continued to flourish and was revived over and over again. This is a state that had the audacity to build the Erie Canal and not just change the American economy, but to change the American continent forever. That was a public-private partnership that created extraordinary wealth for the innovators who built it and also spread the prosperity to workers and business owners who benefited from that transformational work. And we take it for granted, but 7 or 8 decades after the canal, another generation of New Yorkers had the vision to see that a massive underground transit system, unlike anything ever built in the history of the world, could create a metropolis unlike any that had ever existed. And they built it, and now more than 8 million people a day travel on it, and it is as indispensable to our city as air, water, bagels, or even coffee. These are great visionary accomplishments, but ladies and gentlemen, I do think we are at the beginning of an era where if we do our work well together, if the state actors in New York work well with the entrepreneurial tech community in New York, we can be in another phase with innovations that are that great. I think the current explosion of the very distinctive New York tech sector makes that possible. We've had some exciting companies already developed at the very early stages of the emergence of this sector, Etsy, Kickstarter, Tumblr, and I would urge you to consider that, in my view, New York's tech sector is quite different than that in most states. New York is the heart of media, fashion, art, finance, music, so many things. It just makes sense that the most creative tech entrepreneurs would want to be close to innovators in other sectors. If you're a talented tech star, where would you rather be? In Silicon Valley, so you can talk to other tech people 24 hours a day, or in the greatest city in the world, inspired by musicians and artists and the most culturally and ethnically diverse group of neighbors you can have anywhere in the world. So you really think Kickstarter would have happened in San Jose? I don't know. I mean, it's sort of hard to examine. It's hard to predict these things, but it brings together tech, arts, and culture in a way I think you could only do in this city. And we are, in fact, adding tech jobs at a faster rate than Silicon Valley. People are moving here. They want to be here. And that has significant implications for those of us who make public policy. We need to embrace new business models and new forms of civic engagement and use them to grow our economy, but also to build the best government, the best regulatory systems, and the strongest democracy in the country. That is what we can do if we do our job well. Some of the civic innovation apps that are being developed now are extraordinary. It is hard to change laws and regulations and move bureaucracies, but with our collective efforts, I think there are tremendous things we can accomplish in the next few years, and I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger and more systemic. The New York tech community, I have to say, really was the key to winning the fight to preserve net neutrality. I know a lot of other people are taking credit for it, but frankly, the civic spirit of New York's tech community is strong, and the willingness to engage in the public sphere is stronger than in a lot of places. You guys really were the key to doing that. So it's up to those of us in state government now to nurture this spirit and to make sure that the community can expand in a responsible way. Our goal is an evolving state framework to ensure what I call responsible disruption. Now, in the tech sector, the word disruption is often seen as an unalloyed good, but I personally think that some disruptions have unintended and negative side effects. Donald Trump, for example, is clearly disrupting the Republican Party. If he were to become president, I don't know that I would consider that responsible disruption. So we have to look at the consequences of change and of proposals for change and of disruption, even as we try to promote people's ideas. We want people to come up with ideas, but we have to understand what are the core values we have to keep our eye on as we advance those ideas into the public sphere and into commerce. For New York to create the best framework in America for responsible disruption, I think we have to dig down, and I don't think it's really all that complicated. We examine our rules and laws to make sure we're protecting the most critical interests and only the most critical interests. For me, responsible disruption is based on 4 simple principles. 1, nurturing competition in fair markets. The second, identifying and accounting for the hidden costs or externalities of doing business in new ways. Third is protecting consumers. And finally, supporting workers as business models evolve. So let me take these principles one at a time. I believe in active competition in a vibrant marketplace. Innovation does not succeed in an environment that mindlessly protects the status quo, and monopolies, cronyism, outdated laws tend to stifle new ideas. And in New York, we have our layers and layers and layers of laws passed over decades, or even in some cases centuries, that sometimes impede competition. But as we're starting to peel those laws away and take a fresh look at them, we have to take care not to allow new monopolies to emerge. We don't want the old monopolies, but we certainly don't want to create new ones. We need to protect our markets. The goal is to protect our markets, not to protect any particular business or model of business. This is critically important. So we protect our markets from old monopolies and old cronyism, and we have to protect them from new potential monopolies and cronyism. Second principle, when we upset the status quo, we have to scrutinize very carefully the hidden costs or externalities of doing business in a new way. Whether those costs are to the environment or a reduction in public safety or the diminution of quality of life, we have to be willing to examine and identify all of these impacts of a business model and take them into account as we're adapting our laws. There are, and I hope some of you will recognize this, there are some cyber libertarians out there who pretend that these externalities, which are the costs borne by the larger community, are not their problem. To me, that's like an oil refinery that refuses to acknowledge that it has responsibility for the collateral consequences of the black smoke belching out of its smokestacks. Responsible disruption rejects these notions as a crude way of rationalizing socially irresponsible conduct. So our second principle is always to watch out for externalities and unintended consequences. Third, very simply, we have to protect consumers. And protecting consumers is one of the most amazing and challenging parts of the work we do in the Attorney General's office, because along with that great spirit of brilliant, public-minded entrepreneurs, there is a great spirit of private-minded creeps, crooks, and con artists in New York that has thrived side by side with the good entrepreneurs for centuries. So we have to make sure that new technologies are accompanied by new ways of protecting consumers to make sure that everyone is safe. There are new issues that are posed by new products. If a business takes advantage of New Yorkers through fraud or other means, I will not hesitate, and I hope you will join me in ensuring that I continue to be able to bring the full force of my office against the bad actors who would abuse our consumers. Deceptive practices on the internet are no different than deceptive practices in the mail or on the street. And there are two victims in any sort of scheme to deceive people: the consumers who are defrauded, but also the lawful businesses who are following the rules and playing by the rules and trying to sell their products honorably. They're undercut by these bottom feeders who try and come up with ways to use fraud or use ways of getting around laws and regulations that are not legitimate and serve no legitimate business purpose. Finally, and this is tremendously important, and I think that people's consciousness has been shifting about this dramatically just in the last year or so, we have to take care of workers and consider how workers are affected as old industries give ways to new kinds of labor. Whether you're working in a factory or a loft in Brooklyn, every worker deserves an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. So in any situation, many people participate in the creation of the wealth or the creation of public goods, and it really ultimately falls to those of us who set public policy to ensure that people get some kind of a fair share. We grow together, and doing the right thing, giving everyone a fair shot and a fair share, is not just the right thing to do, but in the long run, it's how you grow the kind of community that will grow new businesses, that will have consumers able to buy your products, and good educated workers that will be able to work in new enterprises and have people who will come up with the next great ideas. So my office strives to support this principle and the other three principles every day. It permeates all of our work. We want to develop smart and smarter, always smarter, tech regulations and law enforcement policies together with you. Our goal is not any fixed change in law or regulation. It's develop a framework that is the New York framework for constant evolution towards a better and better system of incorporating ever newer ideas. And if we want to succeed in the new political and economic realities of America, we're going to have to work together. So welcome to your collaboration with the government of the state of New York. My office was the first government agency to become a member here at Civic Hall, which is one small reflection of our commitment to this collaboration in this process. We have started to hold office hours here to connect with tech leaders and startups. Some of you have already met with members of my team, and some of the members of my team who you've met with are going to be on the panel that follows my talk. We've gotten some excellent ideas particularly about how to open up government data and work more collaboratively on those issues, and you'll hear about that later. This informal exchange is helping us all innovate, but we have also set up some more formal systems. My office is the only Attorney General's office in the country that is joined together with tech clinics at a variety of New York law schools to help tech startups navigate our state's complicated laws and regulations. We now have partnerships at Brooklyn Law, Fordham, Cardozo, New York Law School, and NYU. And I'm confident that we hope everyone else emulates us, but we are the only AG's office to do something like this. My office, I represent the people of the state of New York. I represent you. We're not allowed to give advice to a private business and pick and choose which businesses we advise, but tech clinics can advise startups that are that truly, there are some startups that seem to be able to afford the most expensive lawyers in New York, and those are people who are my friends and family, and I hope they all make a lot of money. But we also have to watch out for the shoestring startups that may have even better ideas, but need a little bit of legal advice. And that can be provided through these clinics. What I have done is to ensure that my office, and I've gotten the New York City Corporation Council, the expert and authority on New York City laws and regulations, to work with us to back up those clinics to ensure that their work is all accurate, so we can make it easier for early stage startups to put down roots in New York. So we're working together on helping startups. We work together to preserve net neutrality. Before I close, I want to advance another request for another kind of collaboration from you. We really need your help and support to break up the gridlock in Albany to pass a progressive data privacy bill, which my office drafted and which I introduced this past year. It seems that every other week there is a major data hack in the news. This is a huge problem for business, and there are solutions to it, but it requires us to pass a new type of legislation that's never been enacted before. Target, Anthem Healthcare, even the IRS, even Ashley Madison. I see some people who look concerned about that. Consumers need to know that their personal information is secure. This is critical to the way we do business now. And companies need to know clearly how they can comply with mandates. So our current law sets no real standards for data protection. We can fine a company if they delay in notifying people. We need to do more than that. And we have come up with what I think is a really visionary proposal that I want your help to make into law. Our proposed bill would set a broad baseline of protections for all consumer data, but it is a flexible baseline tied to standards that evolve so we can adapt as technology changes. And the biggest innovation in our bill is that we would also reward good actors who follow this constantly evolving standard of best practices by allowing them to have protection from some liability. It's like a safe harbor that you can avoid liability for from some legal consequences if you follow the best practices. We can do that in this state. We figured out how to do it. We can provide meaningful incentives for companies to strengthen their security before a breach. We have to get ahead of this game. Strengthening security before a breach is the way to prevent large-scale breaches altogether. And I've been working in law enforcement for a long time, and I have a very simple philosophy. Catching good guys, when they do something wrong, catching bad guys, excuse me, when you do something wrong is good. Catching good guys is bad. But catching bad guys when they do something wrong is good. But the best law enforcement agencies are those that seek to change the playing field, to change systems, so there are no more bad guys to catch. Let's try and work on doing that in the area of data privacy. It'll give New York a huge competitive advantage and set a model for the country. So I think you get the idea that I believe in New York. I believe in public service, and I've dedicated my life to this. And I know that I join many of the people here in believing that technology can add to the mix to empower and enable even greater collective action for the common good, which is what we do seek to do in my office and what should be the goal of all agencies of government. That shared sense of mission can make our collaboration extraordinarily powerful, and the times make our collaboration absolutely essential. So in just a moment, we're going to have a panel with some of my office's true experts on issues of technology and regulation, and I just want to mention them before I close. Kathleen McGee, the outstanding head of my Internet Bureau, is going to talk more about this data privacy and security issue. Tim Wu, who some of you may have heard of, is going to talk about broadband competition. Tim has just joined our office, and we're very honored to have him with us. Of course, he's a leading voice on internet law and tech innovation, and well known as the man who coined the term net neutrality. He's my new senior enforcement counsel and special advisor, so we welcome him to the team. We also are joined by Eric Stock, who runs my antitrust bureau, to talk about the complex evolution of competition issues in this context, and Lacey Keller, whose name tag outside her office was changed to Killer, who who runs my research team, and is going to talk about our open data project and how tech leaders have been working collaboratively with us and can work more collaboratively with us in the future as we proceed. So I thank you for having me here today. I thank you for inviting my team. I thank you for the collaboration that we've had thus far. But ladies and gentlemen, it's time to think big. It's up to us. There's no big posse coming over the hill from Washington. It's up to us to develop the innovations, both in public policy, regulation, and law, and in technology, to lead the nation, as New York has led the nation so many times. So I'm committed to this process. I hope you are too, and I look forward to being here together a few years from now where we can look back and say, we hit that one right, and we did a lot of great things. Thank you very much for having us with you tonight.